Well, that didn't quite go to plan, did it? Today we'll take a look at the 2 preseason games that Richmond have just played, and we'll talk about the Ruck Solution that could be staring us in the face. G'day everyone, welcome to Tigers of Old. I'm Chris, thanks for joining me. 2 preseason games, 3 losses, 1 to Essendon, 1 to Melbourne, and 1 to the Ballarat weather. What a farce. I've never seen anything like it. Not a drop of rain, but a fair chunk of lightning. So off we go in the first quarter and then abandoned the game in the third quarter. So we didn't really get the full hit out. And to be honest, I was sort of glad it finished when it did, because it looked like we were going to get towed by quite some margin. It just looked like we weren't in the game really at all. So before the season started, I did a little video on what I really wanted to see in these first 2 games, and that was about our ball movement, particularly into the forward line. And at times, especially in the first quarter against Essendon, it looked okay. But for most of what I saw, I was at the Essendon game and I watched the Ballarat game on TV. It didn't look quite so good. And in fact, the Ballarat one looked like we'd slipped back into some old habits where we were really pushing up high. We only had 1 or 2 players outside of defensive 50. Once we did get the ball, we didn't have any ground position that we could take because there was nobody forward to kick it to. So what I was really looking forward to was us holding our structure and keeping a couple of players forward in the forward half of the ground, and for us to be able to find a way to them leading up to the ball carrier. That would have been ideal, but it wasn't the case. I think the reason why our structure fell away is because we were just panicking a little bit, and you could see the doubt, especially in the Melbourne game, of players coming out of 50 and not taking that first option. Hopper was a classic example during that game where he had the ball, he had options to hand pass or kick forward to, and he chose to hold onto the ball and wait for further options to become available. And that's really not how the game has been played right across all of the preseason's games. It's been very much about get the ball line. If you looked at how Port Adelaide played, they were very, very good at getting the ball forward. Melbourne were also good at it. St Kilda were very good at it as well, and the Dogs always move the ball that way, and that seems to be the flavour of this preseason, to get the ball moving forward as directly as possible into a forward line where forwards are waiting. So our preseason was all about attack, and that's what we were out there trialling in these 2 games. We really did try from the get-go to attack down the middle, or switch the ball at the very least from one side to the other to create some loose players on the other side. With that came a bit of a collapse of our defensive structure, and confidence wasn't that high. Skills were fairly ordinary against Melbourne, although from what I understand, it was fairly breezy. But they were also fairly ordinary for most of the game against Essendon, and there was no breeze there. I can assure everybody of that. So a little disappointing. What it did show is that we're going to have a better defensive game plan going into the season proper, and we're going to have to put a little more pressure around the ball. It didn't seem we were too interested in pressure. We were certainly interested in making space and trying to provide options or avenues through the ground, especially through the middle or the outer side, to whichever the side we had the ball on. It looked like in both games we were playing an extra defender. In both of those games, that became the opposition having an extra at the source, and on some occasions, we ended up having even 2 spare defenders. Against Melbourne at one stage, it looked like we had a couple. They had a spare in defence and they had a spare in the midfield, and they were using that extra number at the source to great effect. You can't really allow Melbourne to have an extra player at the source if Max Gawn's going to be in the ruck, because he will absolutely spifflicate you, and there's not much you can do about it. So for us, I reckon we might be better suited to having an extra at the source, bring a forward up. Now, whether that means we end up with 1 defender extra and a half forward that comes up into the midfield, so we end up with a 4-person forward line, keep it nice and open. The only danger with that is if they hold 1 or 2 back, but we're going to need to match our opponents, if not try and outnumber them at the source, if we're going to win our fair share of contest. A couple of worrying points. We weren't really able to slow Essendon or Melbourne down. Once they got the ball, they really moved it very quickly. Melbourne moved the ball extremely well. I was really impressed with the way they moved the ball. We weren't able to match them on the way back, and they were able to get players back into our forward line before we were able to get the ball anywhere near them. So that's something to take away and learn, just how they move the ball so quickly. And it was with sharp kicking forward down the middle on most of the occasions that really split us open. Whereas when we look to change direction and go out to a flank, we give the opposition an opportunity to run forward, and that seemed to be what Melbourne and Essendon were doing to us. Their spread was exceptional. Our spread wasn't as exceptional. We didn't seem to be running as hard. A couple of times I was watching in the Essendon game, Essendon led us into their forward line, which was a bit of a worry. They would have 4 or 5 running hard and we would have 3 or 4 chasing, but we were chasing from a considerable margin back. Couldn't see that too much against Melbourne, but wasn't there. So it'd be interesting to get any feedback on whether the same occurred against the D's. Tackle numbers in both games were low from us. I think Melbourne out-tackled us 3-2. That game, I think it was 30-21 or something like that in the game that was just over a half old. So that's something we're going to have to work on. We're going to have to bring that heat to put pressure on the teams. Otherwise, they are just going to cut us open. Unfortunately, with a couple of defenders out, we looked a little at sea down in the back half. So what really stood out to me? Well, there were some players that stood out. I thought McAuliffe on the wing was brilliant. I think he can lock that position in. The other wing's still up for grabs. It's a little bit Hugo Ralphsmith, a little bit Tyler Sonsi, a little bit James Trezise. Trezise in that wing position does get back and help in defence pretty well. Hugo does as well. Tyler not as well. So it'll be interesting to see who they end up going with on the wings. Rechko evidently tore it up in the VFL, so he's not out of the question. Lawler was really good. If he can stay fit and healthy, then he will be a great addition to our midfield. He got plenty of the ball against Essendon. He got 15 disposals against Melbourne, predominantly with his hands, trying to bring the ball from inside to out. I'd like to see him kicking the ball a bit more. He's got great foot skills. Would be really good to see him being used as an outside runner as well as the bull that's inside. Him and Taranto seem to be doing most of the bull work. Grill was really good in both games, used his speed to work his way around players, used his agility, used the ball fairly well, and also assisted in defence. So really like what I've seen from him. He will line up in round 1 as long as he's fit and healthy. Tom Lynch in his one game back, I thought really good, or his half. I thought he competed really hard. Ball didn't go to Armstrong all that often, which is a bit of a pity. But I think if Tom Lynch can be like that, then we're on a winner there. I thought he was really good. I think Jack Ross has been really solid in the 2 games as well. The only issue I've got with Jack Ross is he tends to get it and bomb it. He doesn't look for a shorter option, and his kicking isn't all that good, but he will kick it 50, 55 metres rather than trying to hit a player up on the lead or pass to somebody inboard. Some issues that we've got, I thought Jacob Hopper was a little rough in the first game and then very rough in the second game. So he looks a little down on confidence. He looked a little slower than he was last year, especially when coming out of D50 a couple of times. He got the ball, had options running past him and chose not to use them, and then turned the ball over. He could have given off a hand pass to someone running by. He could have moved the ball forward by foot, but chose not to, tried to do a little bit too much himself and got caught. So it's going to be interesting to see what we do with Hopper this year, whether he could become a high half forward or something, but it doesn't look like he's going to be an option in our midfielder. I think he knows that, and I think that's probably knocked his confidence around a little bit, but at the moment he looks like being a bench player that can come on. We really don't want him coming on getting 30, 35 disposals, but not offering anything the other way, not tackling or being effective with those disposals. So let's hope he doesn't become one of those players that grabs 30 disposals but doesn't use them all that effectively. Tom Brown worried me a little after the Essendon game, but he was better against Melbourne. I thought he was good. His kicking was better. His intercepting was better. So, yeah, maybe just a little bit of rust in that first game. I thought he was pretty good against Melbourne. Ryan Mansell's a bit of a conundrum for me. He's a senior figure in that forward line and he's a go-to player. But for mine, Steely Green's probably done enough, especially from a pressure point of view, to go past Mansell in those 2 games. And I thought Rioli gave us the spark that really, really stood out in the Melbourne game. And I think Rioli will be there round 1 as well. And you'd think Seth Campbell would be there. He looked a little rusty as well. So I don't know where that leaves Ryan Mansell, whether he can come further up the ground or play that high half forward. But he seems a little one-dimensional. He runs on the lead to take the ball and he runs back toward goal to take the ball. But he runs very straight lines. I've just got a feeling that his opponents can lock him down fairly easily. Doesn't get enough of the ball for mine. And while his pressure isn't bad, he's not creating enough opportunities for us up forward. So it'll be interesting to see what we do with him. Gibcus got through the 2 games, but he still looks a little off the mark. It'll be interesting to see what happens when we have Loston and Bolter back, although we'll talk about Bolter soon. It'll be interesting to see where Gibcus fits. I think he'll only get better, so let's stick with him. And injuries to the kids are a worry. You know, we've got Sam Cumming potentially out long term now. We've got Smilly still not running around fully and kicking the ball. He didn't show for the VFL on the weekend. Fall is in concussion protocols. Hopefully he's okay for round 1. Sims is obviously going to be fairly long term, and Hotton's obviously fairly long term. So yeah, 4 of last year's draftees and our number 1 draftee from this year just gone are going to be sitting on the sidelines potentially for round 1, and some of those will be out probably until fairly deep into the season. So it's a pity that our kids have got so many injuries. What we really want is to see them out there playing. And if you watched, I know I was fairly jealous watching some games on the weekend. Yeah, players like Lindsay had a pretty good game on the weekend, and other good players played fairly well, although the number 1 draft pick did fairly well, just didn't have his kicking boots on. That was interesting to watch. It does look like after that West Coast game too that we might not quite finish on the bottom. So that was good to see. But the real elephant in the room for me is the ruck. So Nank was good around the ground, I thought, against Melbourne. He tried really hard, and Nank's always going to give you 101%. There's no doubt about that. I thought he was better in the ruck. I think the new ruck rules probably don't suit Gawn as much either as perhaps some other ruckmen, so they're a little more even. The difference is that when Gawn got the tap, it was to advantage most of the time. When Nank got the tap, he seemed so surprised he was getting the tap that it wasn't to advantage. And this comes a little bit back to pre-season. Nank was really in cotton wool through pre-season. I don't really think he had much to do with any of our match sim, which is a bit of a concern because we've come into these 2 games with Nank really underdone and having no strategy around what he was trying to achieve in the way of tap-outs in these 2 games. Whereas you could see with Essendon and with Melbourne, they both had structures. They both knew exactly where the ball was going to drop every time, whereas it looked like to me that Nank was just trying to get his hands on the ball, and then we could lock it up and maybe go again with a push and shove from a secondary throw-up. But for me, the solution staring us in the face, we've got another guy who can leap really high. We've got a guy who's really athletic, who could really add something around the ground as an extra ruck rover, who can fall back into defence and help out, and that's Noah Bolter. And I know he's got a bit of a hamstring at the moment, so we haven't been able to trial him. But with the way the ruck is going, I can't see Lafau being tall enough to have an impact. Campbell Gray didn't look tall enough. Liam Fawcett, I think, is still a fair way off. And it looks like we don't really want to throw one of our tall falls like Fall or Armstrong or Lynch into the ruck. And it looks like Sims is probably still 6 to 8 weeks away at least from resuming. So it wouldn't surprise me if we did turn to Bolter to have a bit of a crack at the ruck. And it's not a bad idea. He gives us a lot of athletic ability. He kicks the ball well. He kicks the ball well long. He's fast. He's quick. He can win his own ball around the ground. And he does give us a target coming out of defence. So maybe Noah Bolter is the answer that's staring us in the face. Maybe we're just waiting for him to get well. Hopefully, I know he's been trialled at centre-half back, and I know that's where Richmond have said they are going to play him. But yeah, cometh the hour, cometh the man. I've just got a feeling Noah Bolter might be the one that we need running around in the ruck. So let us know what you think, everybody. The 2 games didn't exactly go to plan. I thought we were good at times against Essendon. I thought we battled hard against Melbourne to try and put our game plan into place, but once they won the ball, it was easy pickings. They got the ball forward very, very quickly and very easily, and we weren't able to stop them. That comes back to a little bit of a lack of pressure in the forward line, apart from Steely Green and from Rioli, and also a lot of lack of pressure from the midfield. It looked like our midfielders weren't able to apply that much pressure, and they were outnumbered. It was also a worry that the ball was taken away at the source fairly easily. So let us know what you think. We've got a game in 10 days' time. I'll come back later in the week and we'll start to look at what that first team for round 1 will look like. Thanks, everyone.